Good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday. We're at the end now. We have finally reached the end of our rookie deep dives, and we are going out with a fun one, but it's probably going to be kind of a shorter one because this guy, he's a lot of fun. He's very interesting. I think he's got a chance to make an impact at the NFL level. There just isn't a whole lot to look at here. There's not a lot of tape you can study. The tape that you can look at, he's playing against guys who will never, ever, ever make the NFL in 99% of these situations. Like, it's it's hard to say too much about the way this guy plays. I can say a few things, and you can derive some things from the numbers he put up at Lenoir-Rhyne, but to really say much more about Dareke Young other than the obvious is hard because you just can't really watch the tape on this guy because the tape is there's not a lot of it, and what we do have is not of the highest quality. His games were not exactly being aired on ESPN. So Dareke Young, I'm intrigued. The more I started to look into him, the more I started to think this guy has a chance. But there's just not a whole lot to go on here, so I'm going to do the best that I can. But most of what can be said about Dareke Young can be summed up by his testing scores and his performance over his career at Lenoir-Rhyne. So, our final pick in this draft, number 233 overall, a guy who had to scrape and claw his way up draft boards just to get into the draftable pool. So, wide receiver, another wide receiver. He's 22, but he's going to turn 23 in I think 3 weeks. So, he'll be 23 by the time he actually does anything for this team, if he does anything at all. So, 22 in more than 11 months, actually, but 23 for our purposes. Um, where he starts to really get you to notice him would be his measurables. Unlike maybe your expectations of a guy who played college football at Lenoir-Rhyne, his measurables are good. In a lot of areas, they're fantastic. This is not an instance where a guy who's physically incapable of competing at the highest level had to go play at a very low level like Lenoir-Rhyne. This guy physically, in terms of what he can do athletically, is impressive. He's 6'2", which puts him in the top third among receivers that have gone through the combine process over the last 20 plus years. He weighs 223 pounds, which puts him at about the 91st percentile, so he's one of the heaviest wide receivers to go through the draft process lately. His arms are well above average, 32.6 inches, 68th percentile. He's got huge hands for a receiver, really big, 10.1 inches, 91st percentile. By the way, I should say Dareke Young actually didn't go to the combine this year. All of these percentages I had to actually kind of farm manually because he didn't actually go to the combine. These measurables are from his pro day. So keep that in mind. It wasn't the most sanitized environment, but nevertheless, it does paint a pretty good picture here. His 10-yard split, 1.54 seconds, 65th percentile, so well above average. His 40 time, despite being big and despite being tall and despite having long arms, big hands, really nice 40 time. 4.44 puts him in the 76th percentile. So he doesn't lose anything for speed just because he has size. And do you guys see what I'm kind of getting at here? Are you guys starting to see the things that I started to see when I was looking at this guy? I was like, when you hear Lenoir-Rhyne, you're thinking about a guy who's like 5'9" and weighs 150 pounds, and he's quick enough to beat the mailmen and future milkmen and mailmen he's going up against at Lenoir-Rhyne, but that's not going to fly in the NFL. But you look at these measurables and you're like, no, these measurables paint the picture of a guy who should be able to compete against NFL caliber players. His vertical jump was good, 37 inches, 71st percentile. He's got hops. His broad jump was off the charts almost, 97th percentile at 135 inches. The dude is borderline Olympian in his ability to do the broad jump. His three-cone drill was above average, 6.88, 62nd percentile. Turns better than average. 20-yard shuttle was nice, 4.19, 67th percentile for receivers. And he's got some strength, too. 22 bench press reps of 225 pounds puts him in the 94th percentile. So there are some areas where he stands out. His weight, hand size, broad jump, bench press. He's not just good. He's one of the better prospects over the last couple decades that the Combine had ever seen, if he had gone to the Combine. Again, he didn't. He was doing stuff at his pro day. Sometimes you can't totally trust the pro day numbers, but unless they're way off, unless they're just completely lacking credibility, then this paints the picture of a guy who belongs in the NFL. All right, so let's take a look at what he did during his 5-year career at Lenoir-Rhyne. The reason why he went to a smaller college, by the way, was because he broke his leg in his last year of high school football. And when he came out of high school, he was small, he was slow, he basically had none of the stuff we just went over. His 40 time was about 5 seconds, and he weighed about 175 pounds. So he did not peak physically until he started playing college football. So the first year, he only played in 8 games, and he only had 2 catches for 18 yards. Basically, an afterthought. He was basically John Ursua. At 2018 is where things started to pick up a little bit. He started to actually show some of the stuff he could do. And it wasn't just as a wide receiver. The Lenoir-Rhyne, they used him as a receiver, but actually they used him as a running back more. He was their Debo. And there was a lot of buzz this year in the draft, finding the next Debo, because the way in which the 49ers utilized Debo was original, different, unlike what we usually see from wide receivers. So a lot of people are talking, who's the next Debo? Is it Treylon Burks? Might be him. But Dareke Young also calls to mind Debo. This guy actually was used as a running back more than a receiver in his sophomore year. He had 4 touches for 81 yards and a touchdown against West Alabama. He had 4 carries for 46 yards and a touchdown against Martzall. That's a game where he never actually got to catch the ball. He was only used as a running back. 3 touches for 68 yards against Limestone. 8 touches for 54 yards and 2 touchdowns against UNCP. He had 4 carries for 78 yards and 1 touchdown against Catawba. I don't know. I tried. But he was actually a more prolific runner than a receiver. So if that doesn't paint a picture of how he might find his way in the NFL, then I'll put it to you that way. It's like what the Niners did with Debo. And we all know that Debo, a big part of the reason why he kind of saw his relationship with the 49ers start to crumble, he doesn't like to be used like that because it's going to shorten his career. And Debo's a guy who has the dollar bills on the mind. He wants to have a long career so he can make money. Dareke Young's just trying to have a career. He's already said, whatever way the Seahawks want to utilize me, I'm for it. Receiver, running back, special teamer, return man. He did all these things at college. So if you want to know how Dareke Young can find a way to do something that other players on this team can't do, it would be lining up in the backfield, being used as a running back, and also adding value on special teams. All right, so 2019, he started to be utilized as more of a receiver. He was still used as a running back some, but in 2019, he actually kind of started to break out more as a receiver. He played in 14 games, and he recorded stats in 13 of them. He led the team in catches, only 25, which says something about his fellow receivers on the team. 515 also led the team in receiving yards. He had 8 receiving touchdowns and 12 total touchdowns, so I can't take anything away from that. He was still a very dynamic threat. He had, I think, 12 touchdowns on something like 86 touches total. So he was extremely efficient. He was explosive. And as I saw these things, I was like, I can kind of start to see it. I see where this guy has a chance. Some of his best games, 8 touches for 81 yards and 3 touchdowns against Virginia Union. 8 touches for a buck 27 and a touchdown against Mars Hill, 5 touches for 91 yards and 2 touchdowns against Wise, 5 touches for 141 yards and a touchdown against Tusculum, 9 touches for 139 yards and a touchdown against Limestone, 11 for 81 and a touchdown against West Florida. This is consistent big production. Pretty much every other game that Lenoir-Rhyne plays, he's not just producing, he's producing in a big way. He's finding the end zone. He's making big plays. He's producing a game-changing amount of yardage in the offensive in the offensive attack. It's not just a couple catches here and there where he's showing off some stuff but not really helping the team. He is putting the team on his back. And again, he did it as a runner and a receiver this year. This was probably his best year in college. And it seemed like maybe we were going somewhere. Unfortunately, 2020 and 2021 had different plans. So 2020, self-explanatory. COVID basically took the whole season away. They had something called like a spring season where they played 2 games in 2021, and that kind of counted as the 2020 season. Dareke showed up big time in both those 2 games. He had 6 touches for 57 yards and a touchdown against Wingate, and then he had a career-high 9 catches for 166 yards and a touchdown against Tusculum. So he had become a guy who you could reliably count on to produce in a big way in pretty much every game that Lenoir-Rhyne played. By the end of 2020, which again, he lost a lot of experience, lost a lot of production because he only got to play in 2 games that year. And it was kind of weird anyway because both those games were played in the spring of 2021. But he was on his way. And then 2021 happened. So 2021, he only played in 5 games. He produced pretty well in all 5 of those games, but then he had a MCL strain and he missed most of the season. His best game was 8 catches for 160 yards and 3 touchdowns against Mars Hill. So, I mean, that's a dominant stat line. That's a dominant game that he played. But he just didn't get the full opportunity to showcase what he could do. Fortunately, he did enough in 2019, and in the games that he did play over the last 2 years, he also produced at a efficient and high level to where you combine that with his testing scores and you see a guy who's got a real chance here. So I'm going to talk about him the best I can, knowing that there's not much tape to look at, but I think I've already painted a pretty good picture of what he is. His testing scores and his measurables stack up to elite NFL prospects despite small school origins. The reason why he went to a small school was because he was slow and small when he was trying to find a college that would pick him up. And then he grew a bunch. That's really all there is to it. So to evaluate him based off that is a little disingenuous. If this guy had gone through his growth spurt and general athletic improvements coming out of high school, he probably would have gotten picked up by a much bigger college. He's highly capable as a runner in a Deebo Samuel-like role. Like I said, there were those 2 years where he was used constantly as a running back. And look, if you are adding value as a receiver and a running back and a return man and a special teamer, which this guy could do all 4 of those things, or at least some of those things, your ability to make the roster is enhanced. Right now, I think Dareke makes the practice squad. But don't be shocked if he makes the active roster because he might make a running back redundant. He might make a special teamer redundant. He might make a return man redundant. It's all on the table. Like I said, he has some experience as a return man and a special teams tackler. He's got a good understanding of how to use his size to his advantage and out-physical opponents, especially trying to come down with contested catches. He had a lot of big plays at Lenoir-Rhyne. 16.1 yards per reception and 7.5 yards per rush on his career. So a lot of those plays that he made were long plays, chunk plays. And he didn't have great quarterback play at Lenoir-Rhyne. I think that kind of goes without saying. But he was able to make do and still make a lot of big plays. He can line up all over the place as a wide receiver. He's very versatile. He lines up all over the field. Left side, right side, outside, inside. He gives you a lot of stuff there. He's a good blocker. He's very strong, and he's able to utilize that well as a run blocker. His catch radius is big. He's got pretty long arms. He's pretty big in general. So I'm kind of starting to see where this can actually produce something meaningful. Now, some of the things that I would say about Dareke that are more in the negative would be he's not a great yard after the catch guy yet, which is a little disappointing because if you look at his measurables, if you look at his testing scores, you see a guy who you would think, oh, this guy can be yards after the catch. Also, he's a good runner. He's a good running back, so you would expect him to be able to parlay that ability to yards after the catch, but it's not all there yet. I think that's something he's going to have to work on. He's not a great route runner. He can get away with that at Lenoir-Rhyne. He's not going to be able to get away with it at the NFL. He's going to have to massively improve his ability to run good routes. There, even though he's physically capable of it, regardless, going from the guys he was playing at Mars Hill and Tusculum and West Alabama to the NFL, it's going to be a massive learning curve. And if he doesn't massively improve his route running, it's not, all those physical tools I just mentioned are not really going to matter that much. So this is probably going to take some time, and it may very well never happen. You can see a path to it happening, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen, and it certainly doesn't mean it's going to happen fast. And also, he does have some injury history. He tweaked his MCL last year, and he had a broken leg coming out of high school. Nothing terrible. He was clean mostly throughout his college career, but it's not a completely clean injury report either. And that is it for Dareke Young. That's really all I can say. There just isn't a lot we can guesstimate here until we actually see him. He's obviously got an uphill battle, same with Bo Melton, because we have so many receivers at the top and bottom of the depth chart. But I think both those guys are bringing something to the table that might be a little more interesting than what a guy like Penny Hart brings to the table. Maybe even what a guy like Aaron Fuller brings. And you guys know I like Aaron Fuller, but it's been years and it hasn't happened yet. So at this point, maybe you do move on. And that's it for this video. Let me know what you guys think of Dareke Young. Maybe you guys know something I don't. Maybe you guys went to a Lenoir-Rhyne game at some point. Maybe you had your smartphone out and you recorded it. Maybe you could show it to me, I guess. But there's not a whole lot to go on right now. I did the best I can with what we've seen and what the stat sheet and the test scores say. All right, I will see you guys probably tonight on Twitch. Obviously, this was the end of the rookie deep dives. I'm not going to do the UDFAs for now because we don't know who's even going to make the team, who even has a chance of making the team. Probably only one or two guys. But we will be opening up a new venue of content tomorrow. Keep an eye out, and I hope to see you guys later. Go Hawks.